Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week I'm joined by Bill M, who is a Magister for the Church of Satan. Now I know what you're thinking, you hear Church of Satan and you think, all the horrible negative stereotypes of what would be associated with the Church of Satan, but this is what this podcast is all about. This is all about clearing up those misconceptions and explaining exactly what the Church of Satan is, what their beliefs are, and all coming from an individual who is a good representative of the Church of Satan. Now, for full clarity, there's no go to animal sacrifices. They don't actually worship the devil. They don't even believe in the devil. They don't believe that deities or gods or supernatural things actually exist in that way. So there's none of that. And he talks about, Bill speaks about a lot of the misconceptions where they came from, sort of the Bible bashers in a lot of the 80s. I think the Satanic Panic is what people called them, and these sort of things. So this conversation is all about talking about the Church of Satan, what it's all about, as well as delving into some of the reasoning behind a lot of the bad name it's got. Now, this is part one of the chat. In part one, we speak a lot about the Church of Satan specifically, whereas in part two, we speak about a few different things. At the end of the chat, I'll come back at the end and I'll just give a few more details about next week's episode and the upcoming releases as well. But just for clarity, for this part, as I said, it's all about the details of the Church of Satan, what they actually believe, how Bill got into the Church of Satan and why he believes that's a fitting religion for his own sort of ideological beliefs. We talk about the music of Satan, some of the podcasts and Radio Free Satan, part of being offended in social media, the Illuminati, misconceptions around the number 666, discrimination people feel, and having to be like out of the closet with your own religious beliefs and things like that. So it's a very fruitful conversation, and if you're willing to sort of have an open mind and have your mind changed about the potential misconceptions you have about the Church of Satan, this is going to be an absolutely fantastic podcast. Just before we get started, there's a promo for the Release the Clowns podcast, a fellow member of the Britpod scene, so be sure to check those guys out, and then we get straight onto the show. So thanks as always for tuning in, guys, and I'll be back at the end as usual for everything else.
In a world of wonder.
See? That's my feet!
And horror.
The military advise that the flesh-eating pigeons can only be stopped by destroying the brainstem, and that they do not poop.
That makes no sense.
Why did they do that?
One podcast fights the forces of evil.
The new and improved diabolical disintegrating death ray!
Triumphs over adversity.
Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word.
And brings hope,
Live your life.
joy, and silliness.
Perfectly normal.
That podcast is Release the
That's painful.
Clowns. Coming to ears near your head now. Release the Clowns sketch comedy podcast on Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and all reputable platforms.
Oh, this is most pleasing. Yes, quite marvelous.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. Alrighty then. Well, I am joined today by a gentleman named Bill, and he's a part of a religion which I think has got the most amount of sort of misconceptions around it, yet I think probably, or I'm almost certain, does the least amount of harm to anyone out of all the religions. So, Bill, it's great to have you on the show. If you want to tell everyone what your religious affiliation is, and we can kind of jump off from there.
Sure, I'm Bill M., and I am a Magister of the Church of Satan. So I am a Satanist, and there's a lot of things attached to that word, I know, for a lot of people. We can go into details about that.
Yeah, I mean, when people hear Satanist, the first thing they think of is obviously worshipping the devil in a sense of, to be honest, if you choose me, for example, and you said, right, Satanist, first thing that comes to your head without thinking about anything is, okay, a pentagram, so people don't know, a five-sided star on the floor, drawn in blood with like a goat being sacrificed in the middle. Like, that's like the most ridiculous thing of just like Satanist, bam. When obviously that's very, very far from the case. So I've looked up quite a lot about the Church of Satan. I knew little bits and pieces about it. I knew that there was a lot of misconceptions before I reached out to you guys. And I just thought, upon getting on your website and reading a lot of the things, I was just got more and more intrigued by it. And I was just like, I just really would like to talk to someone about this and just have it kind of flushed out a bit more. So that's kind of why I wanted to get you on here. So I suppose probably the best thing to ask to begin with would be, how did you find this religion? Is it was your family involved in the Church of Satan, or was it sort of a thing you found yourself?
It was something I found on my own. I had read up and researched all different religions. I was raised under a particular religion, found that to not be for me eventually. And then throughout my teenage years and my early 20s, I started to, as I said, research and read about all different kinds of religions, try different things, and nothing was really feeling like a fit. And it was in my early 20s I read the Satanic Bible and felt that it was a really good fit for me, even if it's not a good fit for necessarily everybody. And from that point onward, I realized that Satanist was the most accurate title that reflected, my philosophical outlook and my beliefs.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Obviously, one of the things that are kind of the goals of this podcast is to get rid of any of the misconceptions that come along with that, because people, there's so many misconceptions about this, the religion. It's actually baffling to me. But then again, you're sort of the media twists and turns everything into its own will, whether it's politics or a vast array of other subjects that we could get into. So, I mean, with a lot of the religions, obviously, some of the heavy things is the indoctrination, is the, proselytizing, going out and saying, join our religion. You've got Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons who obviously knock doors. You've got a lot of people, especially in sort of Christianity and Islam, who want to convert people. And also in Islam, it's a lot, if you apostate and you leave the religion, it's punished. Some people believe punishable by death. I believe it says in the Quran, it's got quite a lot about punishment of people who leave the religion. Whereas when I was looking up on the Church of Satan site, it's none of that. There's no violence, there's no malice. In fact, I think one of the things, there was one of the questions was, what happens if I believe a lot of these things, but there's a few core beliefs I disagree with? And I believe the phrasing was, you can use any of these philosophies we have. You can live your life however you want to live it. If you like some of these, just take it, feel no pressure. We want every individual to kind of go on in their way. So could I ask you, what is what's the sort of the main part of Satanism? What's your main ethos in a sense?
Well, I would point out, first of all, we call it Satanism. It's not Satan worship, it's Satanism, because it's, to us, the adversarial religion that uses Satan as a most fitting symbol for the life-enriching things that have always been given the devil's name. Things like pride, lust, greed, earthly success, materialistic joy, rational self-interest, humor, nonconformity, atheism, science, being selective about who we love and who we don't love. And, we believe that self-empowerment doesn't come from self-righteously denying these things, but embracing them. And, we use Satan as the fitting mascot for all of those ideals.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the story of Lucifer, I don't know the exact specifics of this, so you may need to help me out if I mess this up, but I think it was basically Lucifer and God essentially just had a disagreement about the way God was essentially treating humans, and so God was, well, obviously this is in religious doctrine, which neither yourself or myself believe in, but in the Bible and things, it's, oh, you disagree with me? Okay, you go into hell. That's it. It's just like God is this sort of huge omnipotent being that basically punishes anyone who disagrees with them. As I think Ricky Gervais said, he's some sort of like psychopath, essentially. He's just this ego-driven psychopath. The entirety of essentially the Old Testament is him basically living up his own ego.
Well, that whole story about Lucifer being the fallen angel, believe it or not, doesn't actually come from the Bible. It comes from other stories like Milton's Paradise Lost and stuff like that, which as a Satanist I can still, take and appreciate. Mm-hmm. But it's funny how many Christians I run into who say that, Lucifer was cast out of heaven and blah, blah, blah in Isaiah 14, whatever it is. And I'm like, no, if you actually read that passage in the Bible, it's a translation of the Hebrew word hail, which means morning star, and it's comparing the descent of Venus in the night sky to this king's reign and blah, blah, blah. You know. Christians usually hate it when you find out you might know more about their book than they do.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, myself in my teens. I mean, I went to a Catholic school when I was much younger. Here we call it
as well. That's not why I'm a Satanist, but anyway. Go on.
Well, I was going to say one of the reasons that I would have thought myself as such a almost militant atheist was probably because I was sort of in a Catholic school until I was about 10, and I'd always have all these questions, and the answer to the majority of the questions, if in the Catholic religion, is because God. And then if you ask too many, it's stop asking these questions. Christianity is a bit more lax on a lot of these things. I know Catholicism does fall within Christianity, but neither of my parents were religious, so they put me in a Catholic school, but I don't know why. But in my teen years, I started to become very resentful to a lot of religion. Once you get a bit older and you become a teenager, especially with, obviously right now I'm only 25-ish, so it's basically, when I was a teenager 10 years ago, the internet was a thing, so you could look up all these things, and I just look up and it's like, oh, there's all these hypocrisies in the Bible, oh, there's all these things that are causing, like, so many things in history, like the Dark Ages and stuff, of like, I think the treatment of, I believe it was Galileo, because he said that we revolved around the sun, and then he was just locked up for his entire life. And it's all these things, and it's like, all this is linked, or caused by sort of people thinking that their own view on how the universe is so superior that you silence anyone else. And obviously the Church of Satan is the opposite of that. It essentially literally says, just do what you want. It's a very much, it's almost, I know that you guys on the site, it says it's basically like the atheist's religion in a sense, because
well, it is an example of a non-theistic religion. We're not the only non-theistic religion out there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not, we don't embrace reckless hedonism either. This isn't a do anything what you want to any person and forget any kind of consequences. No.
Yeah.
This is a religion for adults, and grown-ups have a thing called foresight, and realizing I want to do actions that benefit myself, but obviously I want to think long term when it comes to certain actions. What consequence might this have? If my neighbor's playing music loud, maybe my impulse might be, oh yeah, I want to kill that person. But obviously, no, I'm not going to do that, because that's going to lead to far more trouble than the stereo being too loud.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, I believe I misspoke. I do want to say, I didn't mean to say, you do anything, because that makes it sound like you are just anarchists. Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I want to have you here for, to clarify things. And so, with the Church of Satan, essentially, how does it get started then? That's a good kind of way to sort of jump off point. I know a small amount. It's 1966, but I think it's probably best if it comes from you.
Well, Anton LaVey out in San Francisco, he was out in San Francisco in the 1960s. So this is the heart of the whole counterculture movement, really. And he originally started a group called the Magic Circle, which was just for people who might be interested in strange, weird phenomena. And then it kind of eventually grew into the Church of Satan as he came up with his own philosophy based off of his own observations. Like any philosopher, he had his own personal experiences along with his share of influences, which he openly acknowledged, and codified a religion actually called Satanism that embraced the ideals that I mentioned before. Now, before the Church of Satan was established, there were the occasional people like devil worshippers, though it's hard to say how many of them were actually real and how many of them were just fictional tales from Christian scare propaganda and the like. And you had occultists and people, like Alistair Crowley, but there was no actual religion calling itself Satanism, and at that, an actual codified religion, something that had full details that went beyond blasphemy and ritual, but had a philosophy attachment to it.
Yeah, well, it's with one of the key things with Satanism is that yourselves do not actually believe in Satan as a physical being. You because obviously that would essentially, if you did believe that, it would verify the Bible. well, obviously we've established that the Bible and the Lucifer story, but it would establish a lot of the things that come along with Christianity. So
Yeah, well, I mean, we believe all deities are essentially the inventions of the human imagination. They're projections of the human ego onto things. So we believe, all deities are made up, including Satan. But again, we pick Satan because he's the most apt metaphor in Western culture for being a mascot, a mythological figure that represents the adversary and all that. Satan itself, the word, means adversary, and it comes from the Old Hebrew.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I've seen a few things online about this, like a meme, basically saying, if hell was an actual place, that's the only place anyone would really want to go, because absolutely everything that's even remotely enjoyable is basically a sin, depending on how far you delve. And obviously, one thing that, there's a lot of religions that I'm quite neutral towards. Buddhism, for example. I think there has been violence in the past that has been linked to Buddhism, but I only know about that because of the film Silence, which is, I think, when the Christians were trying to go over and convert a lot of people, and then the main religion, I think it was Japan, the main religion was Buddhist, and then they would essentially run out or execute people trying to come into their country and convert people. That's basically all I know about Buddhist persecution.
Well, there is some bloody history with the role of the Dalai Lama in Tibet and stuff like that, but I don't know too many of the details. But it's certainly not a 100% peacefully, historical religion. Historically peaceful.
Well, that happens with, I think, people. That's the problem. Is we're so
sure.
imperfect. It's communism, for example. It should be idealistically, it should be perfect, but it doesn't work at all. It's every example we've had in history just completely crumbles, and it's the same with one of the things with religion. Is the issue, if I use Christianity as the example, Catholicism, is you've got this hierarchy behind it. Of essentially God talks to this one guy, and then this one guy talks to the rest of us, and you're all basically imperfect, and you should be lucky that this God loves you, and you should really basically be begging for his love your entire life. And it's like, why would I've always said, if I died and went to heaven and I stood in front of God, I'd live my life as a good person. If he looked past that and said, you were all these good things, you contributed positively to people's lives, but because you didn't worship me, you're going to hell, that's not the kind of God I want to worship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to be fair, not all Christians necessarily believe all non-Christians are going to go to hell. No. They certainly have some other theological issues to sort out, I think.
Yeah, precisely. One of the things with the Church of Satan, which I noticed when reading upon, was you're all completely fine with homosexuality, transgender, all these sorts of other things, and I think you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we say explicitly in the Satanic Bible that Satanism condones any of those things, any sort of form of sexuality involving two or more, for that matter, consenting adult humans.
Yeah, and that's one of I think that was the first thing a friend of mine, TJ, I think she's been on my show a few times, and she, I think, was the first person years ago to tell me anything about the Church of Satan. She's not a Satanist, but she just, like me, is quite interested in a variety of religions in certain ways. And she said one of the funniest things is that in the literal doctrine of Satanism, it says, obviously, when it comes to sex, it has to be consenting adults. It's within, as you've just said. So in the doctrine, is literally saying, don't sexually abuse people, do not rape people, do not do this. And the Bible looks at, or the Christianity, Catholicism looks upon sort of the Church of Satan with this evil, and yet Catholics, I'm not saying obviously all Catholics rape children, but there's a weird thing where I have a difficult time with the fact that they align themselves with people who are getting away with child molestation, and they're not being held accountable. They just get moved to the Vatican, which obviously is its own country, so you just get moved there after fucking loads of children, and then you get away completely free with it, living in a nice little city country, and there's no repercussions. So,
well, Church of Satan's policy is if you're found to be a pedophile, you're out. There's no question. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what everyone should be. Whereas, yeah, the shining, the shining opal of truth of Christianity and Catholicism just quietly hides them away and doesn't do anything about them, which is just another one of those kind of. If it wasn't such a horrendous subject and so many people suffering, it would be a really funny thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to have some kind of gallows humor, I think, when dealing with subjects like this.
I could imagine so. I mean, with yourself as an individual, do you find yourself easily offended by many things out of interest?
I'd like to say no, but maybe I do get offended by things. I think just about everybody these days is probably offended by something. A lot of people think, oh, the problem is everybody is now offended by everything today, and my personal take is no. I think the problem is that now with social media, when you put up anything on any subject, there's always going to be somebody on the planet who's offended by that, however rare of a topic it is. But because of the internet, it makes it easier to connect the offensive material to the offended. That's my personal.
Yeah.
But as far as like blue humor, things like that, I wouldn't say that offends me. I'm not a prude.
No, well, I do find it quite funny where when you mentioned about between two consenting adults, and then you suddenly changed and you said, well, more than two consenting adults. It doesn't have to be. That
I realized actually that's okay too.
Yeah, it's just people. It's that. I mean, my sort of philosophy, especially in the recent years, has kind of been let people do whatever they want as long as they aren't harming anyone else. And they aren't causing like detriment to anything else, including like animals and that sort of thing, within reason. Obviously, destroying an anthill in your garden is a little bit different to murdering puppies, but it's one of those. I was going to ask also. I'm just interested in what sort of music you are into as an individual, but also if there's any music associated with the church.
We actually have a list of. We have a suggested music list, and also in Blanche Barton, who was the high priestess at some point, she published a book. It's long out of print, called The Church of Satan, which was about our history and all that. And there was an appendix in the back of music, and the musical list was more so an example of songs with devilish or dark themes that came out before rock and roll. Because the assumption, of course, is that since I'm a Satanist, that, I must listen to, heavy metal, or I must listen to black metal, death metal. I get a lot of people who send me, once in a while, I'll get an email saying, hey, you're on Radio Free Satan. Can you play this, our demo, this death metal band? And I'm like, my podcast is a comedy podcast.
I was going to say, I'll make sure I link to that as well, to your podcast, because I did listen to it. I listened to one of the ones where it's a lot about Bill Hicks. You're playing a lot of Bill Hicks bits. I don't know if that's a bit too vague for you, but it was one of the more recent ones. I thought it was really entertaining. But I did really enjoy your podcast. It was really cool. And I know that it's part of a network, isn't it?
Yeah, so to get onto that subject briefly, Radio Free Satan was established by a bunch of Church of Satan members in the year 2000. And it's been a network of podcasts ever since then. It was originally a streaming service, so all the shows were streamed. But then by the mid-2000s, the term podcast came into being, and the technology was finally available where, not everybody was on 56 dial-up modems, so we could, afford to have our shows together and downloadable that way. So I've been doing a comedy podcast for almost 16 years now.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was going for that long. Well, fantastic. It's funny because mine's only been going for like a little over a year and a half, so I'm like the baby compared to you.
I still say, even if you've gotten like more than, say, like 10 episodes of a podcast, you're still far ahead of most other podcasts that have ever been created, because some people never get up to like a 10th episode of anything, or I've seen some podcasts that like disappear after one episode, start off promising, and then I think people realize, oh wait, this actually takes some work to do, and you got to keep coming up with stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if it's a comedy podcast especially, you need to, that's why my podcast is quite easy for me, because I just basically contact people who are more interesting than myself and then just chat to them and put it online. It's like easy for me. I don't have to think about anything. I just, kind of spit off and go. But I was going to say, in line with the music thing, one of the reasons I brought it up was because in myself, I like relatively every genre of music, including death metal and a lot of the heavy metals. And one of the things I found about myself when liking that sort of thing, I mean, I'm just like I'm a young millennial, I'm white, I'm obviously a dude. So if looking in the eyes of sort of inclusion, there's not been a lot of discrimination or prejudice against me based on appearance or anything. However, one thing about myself which has always been mocked and was kind of discriminated against, I don't want to like parallel it to anything like severe like racism or anything or homophobia, but the main way in my life I've been seen as an outcast or an outlier is my music taste. And I love, Sia, for example. Sia is one of my favourite artists ever, and she's huge, obviously. I do like a bit of Lady Gaga. I also love rap music. But I also, and you say all these things to people, and they just nod, going, yeah. And then you go, oh, I like a bit of classical, I like a bit of songs and musicals. And they go, yeah, I like a bit of death metal. And they suddenly go, what? You like that shouty stuff? It's like, well, it's not quite that simple. It's a bit more complex than that. It's like, I thought it was just all noise and all shouting. It's like, there's actually festivals across the world with like hundreds of thousands of people going to it. Do you really think that millions of people on the whole planet would actually all just unanimously go, yeah, there's hundreds of thousands of different metal bands, but they all sound exactly the same, and that's what we all love?
Yeah, I'm personally not into. I never got into death metal or black metal, and I know there's a difference between those two subgenres, but. I never got into it, but I do know that whenever there's a genre of music a person doesn't listen to, they're going to often claim it sounds all the same, whether it's death metal or rap or country or, anything. And, as I said, even though if I don't listen to it, I certainly acknowledge that, yeah, there's certainly some variations within there, differences within that, even if I might not be finely attuned to them.
That's a good way to be. That's what I mean. When I was younger, I was a bit more elitist. I liked rap, rock, and metal, and that was more or less it. There's a little bit of alternative rock I liked, but that was it. And as I've gotten older, my it's almost done sort of the opposite as everyone else. Most other people seem to like. I've seen teenagers. I suppose it is associated with punk and metal and all that sort of jazz. But like as I've gotten older, my horizons have expanded, and the reason I brought up the metal thing is because obviously it being, I call it's alternative music. It's alternative to the mainstream, and I find that the Church of Satan is like an alternative religion in a sense. It's not among the big, if you say name a religion, people are going to probably say Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. That's I'd imagine if you don't include Catholicism, that's and maybe Hinduism.
Well, Catholicism is a denomination of Christianity. So.
Yeah, that's why I kind of didn't include it to begin with. But some people, I suppose when it's in the census and things, it is included within that. But it's not included as one of the big ones. Yet, I find it's one of the most fruitful from all that I've seen about it. And it's all the things that I've read about it, not only from the Church of Satan website, but also I read a few things, some articles from other places and these sort of things. And it just seems alien to me, the amount of misconceptions that happened. I mean, would you care to... I think it was in the 80s or around that sort of region when a lot of the big hysteria came about, and I would love you to sort of go into some of that.
Well, I can certainly speak to that not only as a Satanist, but also as somebody who was a teenager in the 1980s during the whole Satanic Panic, as it's been. Yeah, there was a widespread belief, especially here in the States, that during the 1980s that there were roving bands of devil worshippers that were in almost like every town who were kidnapping babies and eating them. And somehow connected in all of this was heavy metal, as well as like Dungeons and Dragons and the rising problem of drugs at the time. People kind of made this connection in their heads that if you got into one thing, it would lead to all the others, and they were all interconnected. And during the day, you would see daytime talk shows, Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, and people like that, Geraldo especially. It was quite big at the time during the 1980s to have sensationalist talk shows that were kind of like tabloids in a talk show format, talking about controversial things. And quote-unquote Satanism would be quite a hot topic. And you would see on some of these shows that they would get people like myself, people from the Church of Satan, as representatives, but then we'd be sitting next to, some Jesus freak preacher on one side who, believes all these things are happening and makes all these claims and people believe them. And then on the other side, some random crazy person who just happened to channel his, horrific acts through a devilish aesthetic and call himself a Satanist, even though he has absolutely nothing in common with us belief-wise. And these other two people would get to talk for, 30 minutes, and it's like, okay, Church of Satan, you get 30 seconds for a rebuttal. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there were certainly, that was kind of the typical format for a lot of these shows.
Yeah, they don't want to have a discussion or an open discussion. What they want to do is look like they're having an open discussion, but really skew it in their favor.
But I can understand why, why people have the misperceptions of Satanism if their only sources of information on Satanism have been, Christian propaganda tracks and bad horror movies and, talk shows like that. And on top of that, they may probably not know any Satanists, at least none who are out of the closet personally, because it is a very minority religion. It always will be a minority religion. We're fine with that. It's, it's adversarial by definition, so it's never ever going to be mainstream. So I understand where those misperceptions come from, which is why it's good to have the Church of Satan and, a central source you can go to get things from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things it's one of the, obviously it backs up your beliefs in your religion, but I think it potentially does hinder you in the same way, which is the fact that you guys don't proselytize. You're not going out there trying to convert people to your religion because it's not about that. And I really appreciate the philosophy.
It would be antithetical to us because we believe Satanism is a thing that should just naturally fit. It's something that's not for everybody, and to try to indoctrinate somebody into Satanism, to us, that just doesn't work. If somebody was able to really change their beliefs based on that kind of apprehension or getting, through indoctrination, is that the kind of person we really want?
That's a very
so we
good
don't proselytize, and if anything, we're telling people every day, like, who want to join us, like, no, go away. There's some people who are sincere, take the time to research and say, yeah, this sounds interesting to me, I'd like to learn more. But then you have a lot of people who, from Nigeria especially, oh my God, there are, I don't know how this happened, but apparently the entire country of Nigeria not only believes in the Illuminati, but believes that any website with Satan in the name is the Illuminati, and that they're giving away millionaire job positions to complete strangers. These are people who don't even have the courtesy to send a CV, But, we tell these people every day, like on some of these sites, like, go away. Even Radio Free Satan, who's not the Church of Satan, just, as a podcast entity, gets messages about at least like once a week saying, I want to join, your cult.
That's insane. I was just going to say, like, one of the things that I believe I mentioned it in the email to you, I just thought I actually laughed out loud when I was reading it, was it's just on the Q&A of the Church of Satan website, and I want to read this tiny little bit, which it just says, it's a question. I am Satan, or the Antichrist. I want you to recognize this and help me realize my destiny. What will I do? And then your guys' answer is, we don't believe in such myths. Seek help from a local mental health professionals to assist you to get over these delusions. And it's just that bluntness that is brilliant. I just think that's so funny because you guys must get, as obviously you've just said about
that is a frequently asked question. We do get lunatics like that who contact us.
Well, that's the thing, is people who was trying either try and validate their heinous acts for their own insanity, or they're trying so hard to seem edgy and cool, and they think, what's the coolest, most edgy, rebellious thing I can do? I can worship Satan. Oh, how do I do that? Let's just Google Church of Satan. Let's not look at anything and just message them.
Or ironically enough, like, they get their information again on Satanism from like Christian propaganda stories, and they figure, oh, that's what Satanists do. Well, then I got to go copy these kinds of things that that they're describing. Like, oh, I have to kill a goat or something. Okay.
Do you as an individual, obviously when I air the podcast and things, I don't know your surname anyway, but I wouldn't air it even if I knew it. But do you find that you have to be sort of in the closet with this, as you mentioned earlier about certain people are in your personal life? Are you sort of out of the closet, as it were, or are you quite open with it?
It depends on who the circle in my life is. When it comes to my professional life, I'm in the closet about it. I don't wear my sigil Baphomet necklace outside of my shirt in the office. I don't tell coworkers about my religion. And it's not because I'm ashamed of who I am, or, I take absolutely no shame in being a Satanist, but I'm also practical. I know the reality. And even though we do have laws in the U.S. that protect against discrimination, I know that the reality is that there are some people, say somebody might be really fundamentalist Christian and really paranoid, find out I'm a Satanist, and then may try to make my work life difficult for me, or find some loopholes where I don't get a promotion or something like that. But on top of that, I also believe that religion really shouldn't be in the workplace in the first place.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, one of the things that I dislike about a lot of organised religions, that one of the things that I've said numerous times, is I haven't got an issue with religion. I have an issue with organised religion, only in the sense that it should be your own perception on the world. It should be your own spiritual journey. What one believes happens after they die shouldn't affect anyone else at all. And having a book that tells you, oh, well, you can go to heaven if you're really nice, but gays aren't allowed. It's like, I know it's not that simple in the Bible, and I'm oversimplifying, and also the translation and things, but it's that sort of thinking, which is, it's so frustrating when I can see all the good that Christianity is almost trying to do in a lot of ways, but because of people basically just ruining it, then it essentially gets twisted, and there's a lot of the sort of details in there that shouldn't be picked up by people does get picked up by people. And that's probably one of the reasons you guys are, another reason why you guys are more like, don't come here. Like, if you're going to try and come over here and then just absorb our religion, so you can basically just force your will upon other people, try and, do horrible things, and then try and find some sort of like loophole in our doctrine, or try and translate like a specific line and then say it's just down to interpretation. And I can imagine it's a lot of people, because your religion is, from what I read about it, a lot of it was almost, it was obviously LaVey's own spirituality and how he kind of perceived things, but was there also a part of it that was how it kind of got started, kind of almost like a rebellion against Catholicism and Christianity, I mean, in a sense? Was that like a like part of it, or am I misinterpreting that?
No, I mean since the U.S. is a predominantly Christian nation, that's part of why you might find some of the blasphemy elements in Satanism. But belief-wise, Satanism is just as anti-Christian as it is anti-Buddhist or anti-Islam or anti-Hindu. Since we do live in the United States, the majority of theocrats we run into are inevitably going to be Christians. So it's really a gross... I'm not saying you do this, but other people have made the gross oversimplification that, it's just reverse Christianity, or it's just anti-Christianity, or, well, if you're going to go after these other religions, why pick Satan? Isn't Satan only the Christian bad guy? And as I already explained, that's not really the case. Satan goes back all the way to the Hebrew word, and more importantly, is just forgetting about in specific religions. Satan is still in this zeitgeist in Western modern culture, the ultimate rebel of everybody else in mythology. It doesn't have the same. It has a much more emotional appeal to it than if we were to call ourselves, I don't know, like Lokiism, or name ourselves after some other character from mythology. It doesn't have the same appeal. Yeah,
and that's kind of the brilliant. I think the word is antithesis of it all. It's just I think with Satanism, one of the beauties of it as well, with people sort of getting into your religion, is the only way you can truly understand it is if you actually spend time and look at it in the way it's being presented. Like, read into it. You sort of, a lot of your information is online. You can look into that, and if that's the sort of thing that you're into, you can delve deeper. Whereas a lot of the other things are kind of already assumed, as you've pointed out, and as I've come into contact with before. The amount of Christians that one comes into contact with, and then they start either quoting Bible verses at you, or you start talking about a certain thing in the Bible, and they have no idea what you're talking about. And it's just like, this is meant to be something that's meant to be so close and dear to you, and everyone can do with religion however they choose. But one would assume that if someone is willing to, wear a cross and preach this whole thing about the sort of religious ideals, that they would have actually read the doctrine properly and would even know what they actually believe. I was also going to say, one of the things I've noticed is number 666. That's I just thought there was a little bit on the website about that, and
about the number itself.
It's one of those things where I think it was to do with Emperor Nero. I don't know the exact specifics about that. I don't know if you could sort of clarify that. I'm aware it's not specifically in tune to your religion, but I'm just trying to a lot of the things I read, I'm kind of trying to say things to you and then make sure people don't get things misconstrued.
Well, 666, the number 666, like inverted crosses, is one of these things that often gets associated as being a satanic thing. The number, that association comes from the Bible, from the book of Revelation. At the end of Revelation chapter 13, it talks about the number of the beast being a human number. The number is 666. There's lots of interpretations of to what that actually means. There are some people who believed it was actually the number of Nero, who watched Rome burn. There are other, I read some other articles saying that they found older sources saying that the real number was 616. Regardless of what that actually means and what the origins are, as Satanists, we recognize that there's a certain psychological stigma attached to that number. It is a number with character, and people have a certain emotional association to it. So as Satanists, if we want to make use of that, that fear and that power that people have psychologically adapted to it, then we don't see a problem with that. On June 6th, 2006, for example, we had a high mass. We used that as an excuse to have a huge ritual together for 6606.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Which I was at, and which was quite an amazing experience. There's some video footage, but the video footage just doesn't do it justice when you're looking at things in a 16 by 9 screen versus being in an entire room with people all around you saying Hail Satan at the same time.
Yeah, it's that
a different
atmospheric thing.
Experience. Yeah, it's like being at a concert versus watching concert video.
Exactly. Yeah, I was actually about to compare it to that, because there's some people I know who've never been to like a live show, and
I can't believe that personally.
Nor can I. It baffles me as well. And usually they're the kind of people who say, "No, it doesn't really make a difference." It's like, oh god, I feel sorry for you. You're so wrong. But well, with the church, what is the sort of community element of it? Is it because obviously with Christianity you can basically just show up at a church, you're just there, and then you're surrounded by allegedly like-minded people, and then you all sit there and listen. With the Church of Satan, do yourselves have that sort of thing, or is it more of a how is that? Do you guys have congregational masses and things, or?
No, we're not a congregational religion at all. It's possible for a Satanist or even a Satanist to join the Church of Satan. By the way, joining the Church of Satan isn't a requirement to being a Satanist. We're pretty clear about that. But there are some Church of Satan members who join and have absolutely no desire to meet up in person with any other Satanists. So a better description is a cabal, is how we sometimes describe ourselves, as we're a collection of people who are bounded by that philosophy, but not necessarily a community in the congregational sense. If you want to do some kind of satanic ritual, the tools are pretty easy to find, and all the instructions on doing that and the reasons why we have that are all in the Satanic Bible. And anybody can, buy the book and get supplies and do it.
Yeah.
Group rituals as well. You can get people together to do that.
And what would a ritual? Is there like some sort of like a standard sort of ritual that yourselves do, or is there it's kind of down to interpretation, or?
There is a standard 13-step ritual that's in the Satanic Bible, and it's set up in such a way that it's very easy to go take it and customize it for what you want to do. So even though we don't believe in deities, we do realize that religion and ritualistic expression, especially, is something that humans have invented and use and continue to use, even outside of a religious context. We blow a bunch of flaming sticks off of a cake to celebrate a year of our birth. We cut open a ribbon to open a new store, for example. So, we are a very ritualistically orientated kind of species overall. And we recognize that there is a psychological power in ritual. So we view ritual as psychodrama, as a place where you willingly suspend disbelief just in a controlled situation to emotionally get things out or to celebrate a certain event. And then when it's done, you're, just mentally back in the real world.
And just feeling a bit better and things. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And what I think one of the things that it says on your site, or was essentially like a lot of the progression you guys see in the world came from the people who were rebelling against sort of the religion. It was a lot of the people who did the best in science and philosophy. It was achieved by the biggest rebels in that sort of field. Sure. And it's nice that yourselves have a pragmatic approach to sort of you look at religion as a whole, and you kind of go, well, these elements of it are beneficial from like a psychological point of view and an evolutionary point of view. You see shamans over probably forever of human existence, shamanic rituals. Even when we were like hunter-gatherers all around the world, it was just you sit around the bonfire with your fellow man or woman or whatever, and you just talk and you do these things. And as we've kind of built up the concrete jungle, we've lost a lot of that. So as we said earlier with gigs and things, when you go to a gig, the atmosphere, especially for me personally, I've been to a few varieties of gigs, but a lot of the time when you see like an unknown band where it's a bit more of like a niche people in a sense, it can be a bit more gratifying. And I can imagine, not to take away from sort of the Church of Christianity, but anyone could go to like a Christian church or a Catholic church and just go in and see that. But there must be that nice sort of, even if it's just in the back of your head, that little thing of like, this is our little thing, and not that many people get to experience that. Yeah,
there's a certain intimacy within that, and that further reinforces a psychological, phenomenon of putting more importance in it. But the other thing also to talk about, community versus congregational things, we realize that not every Satanist has the same exact need for ritualistic expression at the same level in the same form. So that's one of many reasons why we don't congregate regularly, like go to some place every week, because it's going to be different for different people. And also the fact that just because I'm a Satanist doesn't mean that if there are other Satanists in my area, I'm necessarily going to get along with them. I just might not get along with them as people, and that's fine. We're not expected to all get along. That's
a very good mentality to have. Too often do people assume, oh, we're the same religion, or we like the same music, or that means we're definitely going to get along. And I was going to say, in the religion, is there like a hierarchy of being? I understand there's the high priest and the high priestess, who at the moment, I know the high priest is at Peter Gilmore.
Yes.
Yeah. How does that work?
There's the hierarchy of the Church of Satan as an organization. When it comes to the religion itself that we're representing, Satanism, it's based very much on individuality, and the individual Satanist, we say, is his or her own god or goddess. Because, as I said, we believe that the notion of deities is a human invention. It's sort of an ego projection. You take these ideas of people you have in your head and ideals and project it outwardly, and that's sort of where we come up with the concept of deities. But As a Satanist, I am my own god in the sense that I am ultimately the one who matters the most to me. I'm the one most responsible for what I do in my life, and so on. So we take that position within that. But getting back to the hierarchy of the actual organization, again, this comes down to the practicality of it's good to have some people who can represent, the religion maybe better than some other people can, might be more articulate and this and that. So we have different levels of membership, and the ranking is based entirely off of how well we see an individual doing in the real world. How well are they applying Satanism in their lives and making something out of it? So we have registered membership and then active membership. And then from there, we have the titles. And again, these are honorary titles. Witch for female, warlock for male, then priest, priestess, and then up above that, magister, magistra, which is where I am. I'm one of the magisters.
Mm-hmm.
Then up at the top is magus. So Magus Gilmore is their high priest. His wife, Peggy Nadrame, is the high priestess as well.
I see. So does that mean that, obviously, two questions, Kat, and I'm trying to say them both at once. I assume you've met Peter Gilmore then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I consider him a friend.
Oh, awesome. That must be quite interesting. And did you know personally LaVey?
I did not. I joined right around the time he passed away.
That was 97,
I never got a chance to meet him.
That's a big shame. It'd been. I mean, I'm not obviously even a part of a religion, but just to have a conversation with someone like that. I mean, a lot of the things on your site talking about him and a lot of his beliefs, and even just someone starting off their own religion and it not turning into some sort of weird sex cult that goes off into in the middle of a forest, then everyone either commits mass suicide or the cult leader ends up fucking everyone's wives for the entirety of it and it crumbling. It's quite nice to see a religion come out in the last 100 years that doesn't do that.
Well, I was thinking if I ever did have that opportunity to meet Anton LaVey, I probably would have ended up talking about music the whole time.
Oh yeah? What sort of music similarities do you two share?
He was a musician, and he was a musicologist as well, in that he was really interested in songs from early 20th century American songs, and I've kind of looked into that myself. There were a lot of... this wasn't what he was exclusively into, but there were a lot of songs about Satan in the early 20th century from America, especially around World War One. I found plenty of them. So people who think that the music about Satan comes from started with heavy metal or rock music, like no, it's been around. It's been around even before that. If you look at Faust and Paganini and stuff.
That's very interesting. And then I was going to say, with the religion, obviously you're located in America, and that do you know if, I know that I saw from your website that yourselves don't really talk about your numbers, and that's completely fine. I'm not going to ask that. Just interested in, do you find, like in the UK, for example, are there many Satanists in the UK? Do you find there's many in Europe? Like across the world, is it more centralized in America, or?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, since I speak English, I'm inevitably going to be running into most other English speakers, which means I'm going to be running into a disproportionate number of people from the US, from UK, Canada, Australia, and so on. But I've certainly met Satanists from the UK, from Japan, Australia, people from all over, really. There's one guy from Ethiopia who I've been talking to for years, who's a big fan of my podcast. And so we talk to each other every now and then. And it's an interesting situation there because one time he wrote to me and was saying he was sorry that he couldn't listen to my he couldn't listen to my podcast because there was a government shutdown of the internet, and I wasn't quite sure what he meant. His English wasn't the best, but I looked it up, and there basically was some kind of mandated government shutdown. This was a couple of years ago in Ethiopia about that, and And I'm thinking, I think you'll appreciate this as a podcaster yourself. Like, wow, like this guy is making like every effort to like listen to my podcast, despite all of those things he's up against of, having to go to like a library to get internet access and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, I have friends in this country who are still like too lazy to listen to my podcast. Like, what is their excuse?
That's like brilliant. And it's quite a weird thing when speaking with individuals like that as well, where it's a lot of people. I mentioned privilege earlier today, but it's that sort of thing of some people really don't know how good they have it. Like, not that people.
Oh yeah.
Whenever I say something like that, I don't want people thinking, "Oh, everyone who living in America and the UK, your life is perfect and you can never complain." It's obviously not that simple, but it is. There's some people who, like, obviously the big one that everyone kind of knows about is like North Korea. It's just like things we take so for granted, just Instagram or Facebook and anything. A lot of people just don't have that, and I imagine have you come into contact with any other individuals who? I mean, there must be some countries that even to like obviously in sort of our two respective countries, you probably get a couple of shady looks. Maybe your career could be jeopardized in some way. But I'm sure there are certain countries which, if you announced you're a Satanist, you probably get killed. I mean, I know
yeah.
There's a lot of Islamic countries, Sharia law and things. That I imagine.
Well, I do know some. Yeah, I've been contacted by some Satanists who are out in some of these Islamic countries where, it would pretty much be illegal to declare oneself a Satanist, or there would be if the wrong authorities found like a Satanic Bible in their home, that could be a big deal as well.
That's insane. It's crazy. I have interest. Earlier in this conversation, you said obviously you guys wouldn't want everyone to sort of be a Satanist in a sense, but if by this is just a really random hypothetical question, if by like magic you could flick a switch and kind of make everyone get rid of all the pretense of the negative misconceptions with Satanism, if you could do that, do you think, and everyone just kind of knew about your beliefs, do you think there'd be like a much higher amount of people trying to indoctrinate themselves into it?
I think there would be some more people trying to maybe thinking it was an exciting fit when in the end it might not be. I don't really kid myself into thinking that any kind of negativity against it would go away, because I mean, we are the adversarial religion. We name ourselves after that, and I've met people who even seem to be very level-headed, even like atheists, who even after even after I would explain what Satanism is and isn't, they just refuse to accept it, and they seemed compulsively trying to find something wrong with it. There must be something wrong with it that I can find, and will unravel the whole thing.
Have you personally have had anyone like attack you verbally or physically or anything like that? Like anyone like because of the religion, or has it just been more of a sort of shady glance sort of thing?
No, I've gotten plenty of hate mail. I've gotten accusations in person, plenty of things like that, even some vandalism.
Oh, really?
It's certainly not nearly as much because as I've gotten older, I've become a little more wiser of who I choose to come out to and where to display it and stuff.
That's and out of interest, obviously not to delve too deep into your personal life, but is your family, do they follow the same sort of religious beliefs as yourself?
No, not at all. My parents are kind of like lapsed Catholic. My brother is, I don't know if he'd identify as a Buddhist, but he seems to certainly take up a lot of Buddhist practices. And my brother knows about my, religious affiliation. And I find that most people, once you kind of explain what Satanism is and isn't, most reasonable people are sort of like, oh, okay, so it's more like this and this, and you don't actually do that stuff that we see in the horror movies. Oh, okay. I mean, most people, to their credit, are still pretty reasonable like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if my parents are aware that I'm a Satanist. They may be and may not be saying anything. If they do find out, it's not that I'm sure they will find out one day. I'm just not looking forward to having to deal with that drama.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's kind of like, is there going to be any real benefit to them necessarily knowing? Probably not. So we'll just kind of keep on the DL.
I mean, also, I'm in my early 40s, and they live like 2,000 miles away, and I see them only a couple times a year, so it's not like as much of a problem as like some people who may be young and still living with their parents, and not being able to move out yet. And...
Yeah. And linking with geographically speaking, then with the Church of Satan in America, are there certain states that are there's a higher amount of people there? Are there certain states? Because I recall there being the house that they lived in. I think, was it the Black House, something like along those lines?
Yeah, that was out in San Francisco. That was the original headquarters.
Yes.
The current headquarters is in Poughkeepsie, New York.
I see. And is there is it quite evenly spread across America, to your knowledge, or are there certain states are more?
Yeah, it seems to be. It's hard to tell. Like off the top of my head, I might not know many. I was about to say I don't know any Satanists in North Dakota, but then I was like, no, wait, I actually do know a couple. but obviously, we wouldn't be surprised to see more Satanists out of the closet in Los Angeles versus North Dakota, just because of the population differences. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen there were some where I found it was like pretty surprising. Some places you wouldn't expect, like some places around the Bible Belt, there were a surprising amount, not necessarily more than you'd find, up north, out west. Depends on who chooses to go make outs themselves. And like I said, a lot of Satanists, just by their nature, are just kind of introverted, private people.
Yeah, and especially with
necessarily want to jump on social media and stuff.
Well, yeah, just go on social media and just announce to everyone, especially in certain places where I think Texas, from my knowledge, is quite a heavily religious place, and obviously some people coming out as an atheist, just that alone has got quite a lot of weight to it in some communities and some families. So coming off saying I'm an atheist and people shunning you for that, compared to you saying you're a Satanist, I mean, that must be a whole load of another kettle of fish, like more difficult.
Well, there are some Satanists who just will tell people, I'm an atheist, which isn't a lie. I mean, we don't believe in deities, so we are technically atheists. But, if we have to drop a label in some conversation just to, shut people up or whatever, so some Satanists may opt to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
I do know, like one Satanist, for example, though, whose mother is really crazy, and it's like a kind of a distant relative at this point, but she tells her mother that she's like a born again Christian and was saved and all that stuff, just to shut her up, and so they can move on with their day.
That sounds like some sort of like an episode of a comedy show or something, or a really good movie. Someone like basically practicing and like a half blind like mum like coming in and it's like wearing like the Baphomet or something. I mean, what's that? It's just a St. Christopher. Don't come too close though. It's kind of a thing. Just stay a little bit back. It's really private to me. So I was going to say as well. Obviously, even though you're atheist. The beliefs when it comes to sort of deities and things are atheist. What life after death, for example, is it widespread that to be a Satanist you have to believe in the atheist approach, which is you die, you're gone, that's it, or is it more down to interpretation? So I wondered if you have different beliefs to what happens when you die and if the church accepts other things. And that's the end of part 1. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. In part 2, the conversation continues regarding, the Church of Satan and a lot of their beliefs and things. The conversation sort of stems to the afterlife and consciousness and myself, Bill's, and the Church of Satan's sort of general idea of those things. And we speak about the misconceptions regarding Alistair Crowley. We speak about how people really hate being wrong, and that links in with sort of people being closed-minded intellectually. We speak about artificial intelligence. We speak about numerology and the satanic sins and loads of other things. So, be sure to check that out too. In the coming weeks, I've got more episodes ready to go. I've got a two-parter with Beth Crane of We Fix Space Junk ready to go. I've got a chat with Heather Vickery of the Brave Files podcast, so that'll be aired soon. I've got a few others in the pipeline, as usual. I think I've got 2 due to be recorded next week as well. Podcasts are plenty, I guess, and I've been quite busy recently with a variety of different things, so be sure to keep up to track with me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Instagram, I often do little snippets of new episodes that are coming out, or have just come out. I do movie reviews, series reviews. I just go to some cool places sometimes. Recently, I went down to Wookiee Hole, which is loads of cool caves and things, and they had like a penny arcade with like old school actual pennies in and things from like decades ago, so that was really cool. So my Instagram is generally the best place to check, at genuine_chit-chat. Twitter is pretty good as well. I post quite a few things on there, including random thoughts, mini movie reviews, and I share a lot of other podcasters sort of contents and things, so be sure to check that out if you want to find more things to look at podcast wise. And per usual, you can leave a review on iTunes or any of those sort of places, and sharing on social media and to all your friends is always the best way for this. So if you really like the show, as I always say, check through the back catalogue. I'm sure you'll find another episode that you enjoy, and I'm sure you'll find other episodes that other people are interested in. We've had such a wide range of guests on the show that I'm sure there'll be something that at least each of you can find some sort of enjoyment out of, apart from this episode. So I'm rambling, I'm going on. I need to go because I'm already late for my plans today, so I will talk to all you guys another time. I'll talk to you all next week. Next week is another time. I'm going to stop.